What's up, everybody? It's me, Phil again, and Tanner, who lives across the hall from me. We talk a lot about like books and stuff. He's one of my best friends, and since you guys wanted me to do a review for House of Leaves, I recently finished it, and then as soon as I finished it, I suggested it to Tanner, and he read it in like 5 days.
5 days. I thought it would take a month, but it was so good it took me 5 days.
Yeah. So I mean, there's hundreds of House of Leaves, reviews on YouTube, but we thought, we might give you guys a couple of our impressions. If you don't know what the book is about, I don't know how to tell you what it's about. No, it's one of those things where it's like a story within a story, and some people would say like within a story or within a story. But I guess the best way that I could say is that reading it is like a descent into paranoia.
Yeah.
The main story is about this guy named Will Davidson and his family, and they move into a house. And the house starts to get creepy, very haunted house feeling. And then there's a story around the outside of that, because there's Davidson was doing a documentary, essentially, about the house. And there's this old guy named Zambano, I believe is how I would pronounce it, I guess.
Zampano.
Yeah. And he was kind of critiquing the documentary or whatever. And then there's a story on the outside of that, which is about Johnny Truant, who found Zampano's notes and was telling his story and commenting on what was happening in the book as well. So, like 3 layers of the story, and then there's also like letters from Johnny's mother,
who's kind of crazy. Not kind of, really crazy.
Definitely crazy. So, yeah, it's really a fun read.
It is.
There was a couple of points where I felt like I needed to put it in the freezer so I could like cool down a little.
Yeah. And very much a story of like, you think at one point it's about talking about a literal house, but then you're like, but is it more than that? Is it all in my mind? And your life almost becomes like a part of the book. It's that good.
Yeah. You can go on like YouTube or like Reddit or whatever and like try and figure out questions, people would ask about this book, like, what does it mean? What is this plot point or all that? And like, there's just so much out there that people, just kind of like wildly guessing at what things mean. It's written by Mark Z. Danielewski, however you would pronounce that. I'll show you here. Ooh, shiny. But he's written other books, and Tanner's just recently read one of his other ones. And he's written 3 books as a part of like a 26-book series that's connected to the story of House of Leaves, so I'm definitely going to start reading those.
Yeah, I want to.
Yeah, so we can kind of, and people have said that there's more, like there's connections within that story that clarify some stuff in this book. So if you're interested in that kind of a thing, this is a good place to start, because you don't have to really know anything going into it, and honestly, knowing nothing kind of makes it a little bit better.
Yeah. And like sometimes when you see a large book like that, it can be intimidating. I don't often read books that are like more than 300 pages, but this one is much easier to read. Like, first of all, the plot just like draws you into it, and then there's also like hundreds of pages that just have like 1 or 2 lines on it, or it's as
one of those pages.
You're following with a character and stuff like that.
It's not focusing on it, but whatever. It says, "Don't be scared" at the top of this page, written upside down, and then on this page it says "Don't be," and it's written upside down on the bottom of this page. But that's all that there is on those 2 pages. I mean, the typography in the book is kind of what makes it an interesting read. Like, here's another page where it's just music notes and a blank staff, like words down here in the bottom corner that you have to read. And at one point, I'm gonna try and avoid spoilers, but honestly, like if something has been spoiled for the book, it's really the experience of reading it that's what makes the book good, not necessarily knowing the storyline. But there's a point where Davidson is like falling, and like you're reading the book, and you're reading the book like this, and then you like turn the next page, and then you're like, oh, how do I, so it makes you almost feel like you're falling at the same time, like into it. And then there's parts where like he's crawling through like this small little area, and then like the text block is like this big in the middle of the page, and then it keeps getting smaller and smaller and smaller, and like you feel like you're getting crushed inside that with him. So it's really interesting. Sometimes it's really easy to read and you're just like flipping pages, but then there's sometimes where you have to take 5 minutes to read a single page just because it's so crammed full of stuff. It's written, I would say it's written like a textbook. There's a lot of footnotes, and a lot of people are like, you should read the footnotes, and a lot of people are like, no, you can enjoy it without reading the footnotes. But I read all the footnotes. I mean, I skipped over some of the stuff, like here's a footnote on this page 121, German for building plan. Like,
yeah, you don't need that as much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of books that it references that aren't actual books, not even written by real people or whatever. So as you go through, you start to learn, you know, like, okay, this is probably, and then you just glance down at the footnote and you're like, okay, yeah, that's not anything that really matters.
And there are even some footnotes that seem misleading or seem like they have nothing at all to do with it, but then farther into the book you get, you're like, oh, like, that makes sense about that footnote from like way back when, so it all matters.
Yeah, and then like you'll get back here and then there's a footnote that references like a footnote that's like earlier in the book, and you're like, what? And then you have to flip to that and you're like, oh. So while I was reading this, I had like 3 bookmarks going at the same time.
Yeah.
You know, so well, how would you rate the book?
Well, I give it 5 stars on Goodreads. I mean, if I could rate more than 5 stars, I would do that. It's probably the weirdest book that I've ever read, but at the same time, one of the best books I've ever read.
Yeah, you definitely read it quicker than I did, and I think there's like a space of time between like picking it up and setting it down and then picking it up again that I kind of lost a little bit of like I couldn't remember some things that had happened. So that may. But I mean, I was like 4.5 to 5. You know, it's. I still loved the book. The one thing that I thought was, okay, so House of Leaves. What do you think House of Leaves means? Like the title of the book, House of Leaves.
I don't know. I mean, that's what I kept trying to figure out the whole time. Like, what is the meaning of this? And then the only conclusion I don't want to say the conclusion I came to because that's a spoiler to like the end. But
Sure. Yeah.
There's a part in the end that if you read it, it'll make sense why I thought that could be the title name.
Yeah.
It's with the band, if that helps.
Sure. Yeah. And I know what you're talking about, and that's definitely you know, was like something. But I was reading somewhere online, I think, and they were saying that, you know, leaves is another like word for pages. So it's House of Pages, and so the book itself is representative of the house itself. And so that might be, I don't know, that seems,
makes sense.
Yeah, it seems like that might be something that's going on. I mean, like, look at the inside of the cover. Like, what is going on in there? Like, they don't tell you.
Yeah.
Like, oh, it's just a bunch of junk, and it looks like it could be important. Like, there's scraps of paper and words, and oh, there's a tape measure, which they talk about in there,
And in many ways, sometimes it feels like it's talking about the experience of any, like, time you read a narrative. Like, when you're jumping into the narrative, how you can get so lost in it and lose track of time. Like, so yeah, the House of Leaves could very much be the book, the narrative. Like a story about stories.
Yeah. So, definitely would suggest you read House of Leaves. It's 670 pages or so. He finished it in a week. Took me maybe a month total of reading to finish it. There was a part where I wasn't reading it in the middle there. So I definitely would suggest it.
Oh, I would greatly suggest it.
Okay.
Yeah, I would watch your work schedule though, because I was often a little late to work because of it. That's why I finished it so fast. So.
Yeah. All right. Well, I guess that concludes our review of House of Leaves. So now back to the book. Cut. Hi. So, if you liked our review of House of Leaves, just remember to subscribe and you can catch weekly videos from me, and Tanner will be back and we'll talk some more about books that we've both read, and you know, we'll review other books and other things that we both really enjoy. Thanks for watching, and if you haven't seen it already, here's the link to my first video right here where it says my July book haul, so the books that I'm reading for this month. Thanks again, and I'll see you next week. Good. One cut.
Sweet.
We didn't have to stop. That was good.
Awesome.